And we're live. Hello, everyone. It's Dr. Colin Renaud here with my colleague, Dr. Sasha Rose at the Med Matrix Method podcast. We're going to wait for a few minutes to let everybody file in. But we want to welcome everybody to the podcast if they're watching live or if we're listening to this in the future. Like I said, I'm Dr. Renaud. I'm one of the providers here at Med Matrix. I'm joined by my esteemed colleague, Dr. Sasha Rose. We're going to talk all things nutrition today, and actually the dangers of ultra-processed foods. I'm very excited for this. Patients have been asking us to do this, so I'm very excited. I do want to mention that this is for educational purposes only. This is not medical advice, but we want to bring education to the masses, to our patients about food, about nutrition, about functional medicine. So we're excited to be on the podcast. Cole, who normally hosts our podcast, is not here today. So Dr. Rose and I are going to co-host, and hopefully we can do well. So wish us luck. And if you have comments, if you're listening live, please give us your comments in the comment box. We'd love to see them. We'd love to answer them. Dr. Rose, tell us a little bit of intro about yourself, your background in nutrition, and what nutrition is with your practice.
Yeah. Well, I am a naturopathic doctor. I'm a licensed acupuncturist. I sit on the Forbes Health Advisory Board. And I would say, I was thinking about this when I was preparing for this podcast. I would say nutrition has kind of really been baked into my training from the beginning. Naturopathic medical school is a little bit different than most conventional medical school programs in that I think we take like 4 semesters worth or something of nutrition. So it's kind of just been a part of what I do and how part of the education that I do with my patients from the beginning. Now, what we know in a lot of ways about nutrition and about metabolism has changed. We've learned a lot since I was in medical school, but it's kind of part of continuing education. And I,
Totally.
like we do with all things, with all cases, I've learned from my patients too, right? I've seen it in actual real clinical practice, like how eating really on such a fundamental way really does impact everything.
Everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other thing, just on a personal note, my daughter is just starting she's doing an undergraduate and then it'll be a master, like an accelerated master's program in nutrition and dietetics. And so that's cool. Just been really exciting in college. And so just kind of gleaning from her what she's learning in her, nutrition 101 class and seeing what they're talking about now compared to when I learned. And so I'm hoping to kind of learn even more vicariously.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, when you talk about your education with nutrition, I had the same. So my background, for those that don't know, I'm a chiropractic physician. I also practice medicine as a PA, and I have a master's degree in nutrition. So a 2.5 year degree master's in nutrition. But my 4-year doctorate education in chiropractic medicine taught me tons of nutrition. We had, I think, 6 semesters or maybe even more. I don't remember. It was a couple of years ago, but it was a fundamental piece similar to you of just basic healthcare practices. We talk about nutrition, and I think traditional allopathic medical school and osteopathic medical school, they get maybe a half an hour or like a half a credit or something, or not even. Yeah. So it's a really stark contrast of how we as functional medicine providers incorporate nutrition into our practice. And it's, as you said, it's such an important piece of things. And I'm really excited to talk about this too, because we're in a time where people are becoming so educated on nutrition on their own, in the advent of social media and, reading, and there's so much literature about how nutrition affects health overall. So I think it's a really exciting time to bridge nutritional medicine into how we treat patients. So I want to start us off by talking about one of the hot topics we see all the time and hear about all the time from patients and we get questions about is ultra-processed foods. So I want us to talk about nutrition and nutritional health and nutritional medicine, but let's start off, let's talk about ultra-processed foods. Like, what is an ultra-processed food? What would
Yeah.
you define as an ultra processed food?
I would define it as basically something that it's usually like an industrial product.
Yeah.
Um, and it's gone through multiple processing steps. And
Yeah.
one I think crucial piece to this is that it has ingredients. This food, this ultra processed food, is going to include ingredients that we do not use in home cooking, right? So it's going to have
Right.
things like that you really wouldn't buy when you're going to go make dinner at home. It has artificial flavors or colors. It's got emulsifiers,
Yeah.
which are like thickeners or stabilizers, a lot of preservatives, and maybe even some kind of like modified starches. So that's kind of like, I guess, broad category. There's a reason
Yeah.
why they make these. It makes food what they call hyper palatable, right? Like
Yeah. It
taste really
tastes
good,
really good.
shelf stable. So, and I
Yeah.
think part of our conversation today can be about kind of just the broader issue of that we're very few of us eat locally and seasonally anymore. So
Right.
because of that, you need food that is shelf stable, and it's cheap. This food is cheap.
Yeah. Well, you talk about shelf stable, and that's like a really big thing I talk about with patients all the time. I mean, ultra processed foods you can keep for years and they look the exact same as the day you bought it in the store. And it's almost freaky because food is supposed to rot, right? It's an organic matter.
Right.
It's supposed to
Right.
go bad. You can't keep meat in the fridge too long or your fridge is like, you got to throw your fridge away. It stinks, right? It's rotted. But you buy a bag of cookies or something or chips and you could have that for years and you open it and it's like, oh, this looks just like it looked on the first day I bought it. So
And it might even
um,
taste the
it might
same,
even
which is
taste
really
the same. I
scary.
know. And we've come to this culture that I have conversations with friends and my patients all the time and I think I've talked about it on the podcast too. I don't want to question our intelligence as humans, but I kind of do because we eat things that are not natural. We're the only species that does this, right? We don't feed our dogs and cats ultra,
Mhm.
the veterinary medicine doesn't talk about like, oh, you can't feed your dog certain things. And we listen, right? We listen. You can't
Yeah,
feed your
right,
dog
right, right.
chocolate. We can't feed your
Yeah.
dog. And we listen. But we have almost become this species of subpar intelligence where we have to invent food to eat when we have food
Mhm.
that's supposed to be what it is. And when you were talking about this ultra processed food definition, I mean, some of the things that are in some of these foods is high amounts of sugar, high amounts of fat, salt, and it really lacks fiber. It lacks nutrients.
Yep.
I told this story to a patient just the other day where I had to go to Target for the first time in weeks. I don't go very often.
Mhm.
And I swear from the time I had been there before, the amount of aisles that they built
Wow.
in with
Mhm.
new foods, and I'm like walking through and it's like, what even is some of this stuff?
Right.
It's almost like a science experiment, but it's so wrapped around marketing and advertising and influencer culture on social media that people buy into it and it becomes really, really marketable to children and people who, are trying to, um, they're trying to get certain groups of people to buy stuff. So
Right. Yeah.
it's really, really, really scary, actually.
It is. I know.
Um,
So let's go
yeah.
over some of the examples.
Yeah.
Well, I want to go over some of the examples, but you being in Target, so I
No
guess
offense against Target. If anybody from
no,
Target's
I
listening, I
love
love
Target,
Target.
but
Yeah.
I guess there was this product that came out not that long ago, which was gluten-free Cheetos,
Okay.
and there was this hype about it on social media. And
Yeah.
my daughter and I don't eat gluten, and she eats
I
pretty
don't either.
well, but
Yeah.
she has this like nostalgia for Cheetos, I guess.
Okay.
And so she sees something about gluten-free Cheetos online and is like, they're going to be available in Target on whatever, August 20th. And so we make this trip and they literally were like sold out. Like they had
Oh,
it
wow.
and it was like the shelf was empty because
Wow.
yeah. So,
Yeah. Well,
but yeah,
I
let's go
always,
into
I
some other
always use,
examples.
I always use the example to patients. Like when I was a kid, back in the 90s, we had one kind of Oreo. like literally one. And I remember when the commercial on TV came on and they were advertising for double stuffed Oreos. And it was just like, oh my goodness, the world is
Even
exploding.
better.
We have double stuffed Oreos. Holy crap. This is amazing. Now you go to a store, like a big box store, and it's floor to ceiling. And there's pink Oreos and watermelon and, you know, or Oreos that are made by celebrities endorsement. So it's such a weird change in like a couple decades, right? It's such a weird shift. So I guess from a functional medicine perspective, when we talk about some of these ultra processed foods and the shelf life and the hyperpalatability, what does that mean? Like from why is that more problematic? Not necessarily just like calories and sugar content, but what is it about the foods, in your opinion, and when you try to educate patients, that really is the problem?
Right. So there's a couple things. I mean, one is that a lot of the ingredients, like at some of the preservatives, some of the sweeteners in particular, some of the flavor enhancers,
the starches,
things like MSG, they actually they hit on dopamine receptors, right? So they give you that rush. They give you that feeling good, right? And so, our patients talk about things like emotional eating. And there's a reason why they go for the sugar and the fat, because it, like, on a biochemical level, it feeds you. And then it's addictive, like seriously addictive. And so you want more and you need more. So, and then you're going to eat more. And then things like, people have heard of like MSG, but that basically, it changes your satiety threshold, right? Like it changes when you want.
And what do you mean by that? Satiety, for people listening.
Satiety. Yeah. Thank you. So satiety is like how, when you feel full. And so if that's kind of out of balance, your body doesn't caloric wise or nutrient wise need more food, but your brain doesn't have that message. Your brain thinks, I want to keep eating. And so therefore you get all of the repercussions of kind of overeating.
And this is why you can sit and eat a whole bag of Doritos in one sitting.
That's
and or cookies or something, and you're not hungry, but 20-30 minutes have gone by and you've eaten half the package, and it's like, I wasn't even hungry. Why am I still eating this? And I think it's a really good point that you make with the emotional eating piece, because I see this all the time, and it's a really hard thing that we have to talk about with patients. And a lot of patients, in my experience, they struggle to talk about it because it might be tied to some sort of deeper emotional problem, right? They're struggling in a job, or financially, or in a domestic partnership, or with their families. And, the food, as you said, really, really importantly, it's like it feeds this emotional release of this dopamine, and it's this feel good thing. So I talk about it with my patients a lot, because it's a hard conversation, but I think it's our duty as functional medicine providers to have these hard conversations with patients so that they can understand their relationships with certain things in the world, so that it brings forth how they need to change. I've had patients tell me, and I'm sure you have, that it's like, oh, I didn't even realize that, no one's ever said that to me. And it's not that patients are uneducated. They just it becomes so normal, right? So it's a really, really big issue with the emotional eating. And I think there's also the issue of people think a lot of these types of foods, these ultra processed foods, are healthy, right? Or quote unquote healthy. So many products in the world of food, and you go to the store, they're marketed as healthy. I have patients all the time like, well, I bought X cereal because it said protein on the box. It's like, or I bought this brand of milk because it has protein. And I'm thinking, well, how do they put more protein in milk? Like, I don't understand. So what's your take on some of these marketed healthy products, like bars or plant-based alternatives for meats, or like the faux chicken fingers, like vegan things, and cereals? And what is your take on some of these things?
Those are some of our patients who really do feel like they are eating really healthy, right? They're
really healthy. Yeah. Because it's plant-based or
plant-based, right. Yeah. I mean, So I think I'm glad that you brought the slapping the protein label on everything these days, because I think we are in the middle of that. And, we know how important protein intake is. And I think, I think it's really good that there is growing awareness for everybody, but especially those of us who are over 35, and the need for, adequate protein intake. Like, I don't disagree with that, but as you say, they are slapping that label on everything.
Message.
And it really does remind me of kind of the low fat craze, which unfortunately lasted for decades. And as long as, like you said, like, let's take the example of a box of Oreos, right? If it was low fat, then it was fine. And
it was fine, right?
It was fine because it was low fat, because fat was bad. And that was just like drilled in. And I think it's basically, I don't want to question kind of, human intelligence either, but I think we are all a little bit guilty of just being like, if they tell me I need protein and there's protein on the thing, and then, it'd be good for me. And so it's just this really kind of like reductionist way. And I think, nutrition is complicated and health is complicated. And so it sometimes is easiest just to hear one message and then follow that. But I do think that, you can, like a protein bar, that's an ultra processed food.
And they're so heavily marketed as healthy, and you get big, influencers, or whatever the word you want to call it. And these might be medical providers, they might be doctors, they might be nutritionists, they might be, in the healthcare sphere in some way, and they're marketing this. So it's like, well, this must be good. Dr. So-and-so is on the label, or, or they've got a celebrity marketing some sort of product and they look really beautiful, right? I want to look like them, so I'll go buy this product, right? And it really taps into extremely well done and ultra sophisticated marketing tools, right? That we don't even think twice, right? We don't even think. There's no logical. It's just like, yes, I want that. Or, when you have, I don't have children, but you're a parent. I'm sure, there was a time when you bring your kids to the store and it's like, oh, Mom, I want this because so-and-so on TV is on the box. Right. I'm sure that's a thing. Right. So it just creates this whole nother dynamic. Yeah. And I think you brought up a really good point, right? It's like, if we say to a patient, oh, well, Dr. Renaud said more protein, Dr. Rose told me today I need more protein. So you go to the store, oh, cereal, protein. Oh, wow, there you go. Like, so there's this, I think it is so important, right? As we've said a couple of times, we're not trying to question the intelligence of patients or just the human species, but it's almost like that we can't help it because of these marketing tools. It's almost like a really fascinating social experiment that's happening, but it's really affecting our health so poorly. So I want to get into that too, is sort of from a nutritional medicine perspective, right? We see major health concerns with our patients every day for a myriad of reasons, right? We cover so many topics on this podcast about all the things that we treat, but from a functional health perspective, what's your take on, explaining to our audience sort of with ultra processed foods, what is that doing? What is it doing to the body? What is it doing to metabolism, blood sugar instability, metabolic health? What's really going on there from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I've specialized in gut health for a while, so I guess I'll start with that.
Totally.
We know that some of these, like these additives that we mentioned at the beginning, we know how they all, each in their own way, can kind of affect the gut and therefore have repercussions systemically. So some of these additives in ultra processed foods can include like an emulsifier, which is really kind of changing the texture, right? Like the
right.
I think it's the
there's
texture
a mouthfeel
and a preservative.
My biochemistry teacher called it a mouthfeel, and my nutritional biochemistry teacher said that it creates a mouthfeel. When you eat it, it feels good to eat it.
Good, yes, and that's big. That's really big, yeah.
Right.
So something like polysorbate 80 or something like that. Like, again, one of these. Here's a key, right? Like, that's not something that you're going to go buy and then cook with in your kitchen, but it's going to be
or it doesn't grow in your garden.
Grow in your garden.
Growing that in your garden? No. Oh, okay.
I don't know how to do that.
I don't either.
So we know that actually there's this really protective mucus layer in the lining of the gut, in the small intestine. There's this mucus layer that's like, if anybody's heard of something called leaky gut, right? It's that connection between their gut permeability and inflammation in the rest of the body. And part of that gut integrity is this mucus layer. And these emulsifiers disrupt that. So you're kind of decreasing the gut permeability by disrupting that mucus layer. And therefore, you're also increasing intestinal permeability, which is leaky gut. So what's that going to do? That's going to kind of contribute to an inflammatory state. It's going to promote the growth of certain bacteria, certain parts of the microbiome, the ones that we don't really want so much. Those are like the pro-inflammatory ones. And then you get what happens after that. Well, then you can kind of have inflammation anywhere in the body. You can have either whether it's like digestive symptoms, or it can be joints, it can be skin, etc. So you're basically potentially increasing inflammation, and then even metabolically, like there's some research showing a link to insulin resistance.
The
so
insulin's
that's
a
one
big
example.
one.
Yep.
Yeah, the insulin resistance is huge. And I mean, I know you do. We talk about it a lot. We see it every day. And the thing that you mentioned with when we talk about the ultra processed foods, or the chemistry of it and the ingredients, these ingredients in ultra processed foods, they have such high levels of artificial sugars or artificial types of carbohydrates that when you eat it, your blood sugar just goes through it just explodes. And then, you stop eating it, your sugar crashes down, and you're ready to just totally fall asleep, right? You have this total, you're
and then
totally
you want to eat more, right?
Then you want to eat more, right? Yeah, 100%. So
Or
you do that multiple times a day. You do it times every day, times years. I mean, your blood sugar becomes significantly irregular. And like we said before, we have patients that are trying so hard, and I applaud them for trying. Well, the protein bar, well, it was advertised, it's got protein, it's healthy, or this shake, or like this frozen dinner, like, oh, it looks good, like it's got chicken on the label, when you turn the label over and there's 25, 50 ingredients on it, it's like, well, that's not chicken. So I really try to educate patients on what's going on in their body. And I know you do the same. It's so important. I just want to remind people, if you're tuning in live, I'm Dr. Renaud. I'm here with my colleague, Dr. Rose. We're talking all things nutrition. If you guys have questions, please drop some questions in the comment box. We're happy to answer them towards the end of the podcast. We can't give out medical advice, but if you have questions, please let us know. So anything else, Dr. Rose, you want to comment on in terms of the health impacts with these things?
I think we see kind of these metabolic impacts. We see including insulin resistance, as you mentioned. We see
the weight,
and therefore
obesity.
Weight. Yep. And non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, increased risk of developing cardiovascular disease, and then as we also mentioned earlier, with a lot of these ultra processed foods, you get this dopamine spike. And so, because of the high sugar and the added fats and the flavor enhancers, it really, I'm sure you say this with your patients too. Like, I really do think sugar is an addictive substance, even though we classify it like we do alcohol or opioids or anything. But you get this kind of high level of dopamine, and it's really, and we've worked with different people with different types of addictive behavior, right? Some people are like more vulnerable to that than others, but I think there's a lot like neurochemistry wise, I think that there's a lot that can happen health wise with that. And so that's maybe another discussion, but I think not just the metabolic piece, but in the gut health, but also that kind of
the feel good part, right? Yeah, because for those listening, dopamine is one of your feel good hormones, right? It gives you a high, makes you feel happy. So the foods, these types of foods are designed to give you that feeling. And if you do it enough, it's addicting. The feeling's addicting, the substance is addicting. So the whole action of the eating part is highly, highly addicting. Not only the chemical that you're ingesting, but the way it makes you feel, the way it makes your brain feel. We mentioned obesity a little bit. So obesity and nutrition are hand in hand. It's so important. So I think it's something we should discuss. We looked up the statistics before we started our podcast, and obesity affects, according to the recent statistics, over 100 million people in the United States. It's roughly 42%. So we can talk about strategies. Like, what's your strategy from a nutrition perspective and food and obesity? How do you introduce that to patients? How do you kind of lay the groundwork, to start talking about it?
Yeah. I was going to ask you that actually earlier when well, this is what I was going to ask you about, because I feel like when somebody comes to me and they mention that they have a history of disordered eating, or they engage in emotional eating, I find the conversation to be it's a little easier at that point, right? They've introduced it. They've kind of identified with that. Tell me how, if somebody is not doing that themselves, I'm
like volunteering the information?
They're not volunteering it, but you see it or you suspect it. I'm just curious about your kind of gentle, diplomatic, sensitive way of bringing that into the conversation.
Yeah. I mean, I think I think it's our role. Part of our role as providers is to be an educator, right? Too. So a lot of times when I talk to patients, I always preface that there's no judgment, right? I'm not here to judge you. I'm here to help you. I know you do the same. And I try to open up the conversation with that, right? Can we talk about your diet? Can we talk about your food intake? What do you eat? What does a typical day look like? What do you eat for breakfast? What do you eat for lunch? Why are you eating it? Right? Well, if they preface of like, oh, well, I eat really healthy. Okay, well, what?
What does that mean?
What do you eat? What does that mean? And that's always what happens, I feel like, with patients. You probably have the same thing. It's like, well, what do you eat? Well, I eat really good. Okay, but what? Tell me what? Well, I mean, I'm pretty like clean. Uh-huh. And like, what do you eat for breakfast? So I think the way I try to do it in a nice diplomatic way is make it out to be this conversation about the actual objective, right? Okay, what are you eating for breakfast? Well, I eat this, I eat eggs, I eat this. Okay, well, why are you eating that? Or, I bought X whatever at the store. And then I feel like it just becomes a conversation of, are you eating X because of, whatever? Because a lot of times what patients are doing, and I think it's subconscious, is they're trying to justify, well, I eat blah because I was raised on it, or because the box said protein. So I thought, I met with this nutritionist and they said protein, and, so I just try to use it as an educational tool. And then as the relationship develops and as time goes on, I just try to give the education. And then I try to let patients come to the understanding for themselves. Because if we allow patients to understand and own it for themselves, then we've taught them something and they can translate that into their life and the way they live. I live this way, right? You live this way. It doesn't matter. Not that it doesn't matter, but it doesn't bother us how someone else eats, right? We know what we do for ourselves to keep ourselves healthy and longevity. But when we start to peel away the layers of a patient from a learning perspective and try to understand their habits, it makes them reflect themselves. And then I think it just becomes a learning behavior as we go through treatment and through time, is like, wow, I guess that's, or this is a good example. I talked to a patient the other day about like liquid diets too. Okay. How much soda do you drink? Yeah. Do you drink energy drinks? Do you drink alcohol? And each of those individual things, well, alcohol, well, on the weekends, if I'm out with my wife, I'll have 3 or 4 beers or like whatever. And maybe through the week, like if we're meeting friends, okay, so maybe up to 10 alcoholic drinks a week. Yeah, maybe. Okay, well, how much soda do you drink? Oh, well,
Mm-hmm.
not that much.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe
Mm-hmm.
like 2 or 3 cans a week. Okay. Do you drink energy drinks? Oh, well, yeah, I'm really tired a lot, so I might
Mm-hmm.
have one at lunch. Well, how often is that? Oh, every day I need one, or
Right.
at least like when I'm at work. So in their mind, and again, it's no judgment to the patient, but they think each one of those things is a moderate, like a mild amount, right? Oh, well, only like a couple sodas a week, and I'm drinking alcohol like when I go out. And then I try to say, well, what if you put them all together? Right? If you put all those things together, that's a huge percentage of your intake, like
Mm-hmm.
caloric wise or sugar. And then it's sort of like, oh, I kind of see that. They're
Yeah.
in their mind trying to
Yeah.
separate,
Separate it. Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I
That
think
makes
people do that
sense.
with food too, right? Well, I eat this but it's only once a
Not
week.
that,
Okay,
yes,
but
not that often. Yeah.
yeah, it's not that often. So I think it's part of just the human experience to try to do things that make us feel comfortable. And I think we use that as food too. We don't want to pretend that we're doing something wrong, or so we compartmentalize.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure you
Absolutely.
see that.
Oh yeah, all the
Yeah.
time. And I
Yeah.
think that I think it is partly human nature, and I think that people are often like, I'm doing everything right, and in their minds they are. So
Right.
why do I feel so bad? Why am I tired? Why am
Right.
I so irritable? Why am I not losing weight? Like,
Yeah.
and so I think it does, as we've said multiple times on this podcast, one of the benefits of this medicine is the time that we have with our patients.
Right.
So, like in that example that you just gave, like you have the time to really dive deeper into, well, what do you mean by whether it's what do you mean when you say that you eat healthy, or really, really kind of getting to the details of how often is that energy drink and that alcoholic
Right.
beverage.
Yeah.
So, it is one, in addition to kind of just your knowledge base and your experience in your training, it's the time to give the attention that I think is needed, with some of these issues around nutrition.
Yeah.
Not just lip service, right? Not just go eat your fruits and vegetables.
Right. And that's what I feel. I'm sure you would agree. And we can sort of, I think it's important for us to talk about this too, is that's what people are getting most of. Is that's a great way to explain it, is lip service from their other doctors. And I know that people in healthcare, whether you're a conventional doctor, you're an alternative medicine practitioner, you're a healthcare provider of some whatever specialty or training, we all know that nutrition plays a role. I don't think that, even though most conventional Western practicing health practitioners, which is most of medicine in the United States, I know in my heart that that doctors and healthcare providers understand that food has a role in health.
Yeah.
I know they know that. I know that they don't know how to educate people on
Mhm.
how to bridge the gap. I know they don't understand some of the physiology and the biochemistry of how the food changes their physiology. But I see a lot of times where patients are telling me, well, my doctor just tells me to eat better.
Right.
They are telling me I'm overweight. They're telling me I have fatty liver. They're telling me all these things. And they just, the final sentence before they walk out the door was just, you need to try to eat better.
Mhm.
And it's like, well, what does that mean?
Right.
I don't know what that means. What does that mean? I have, years and years of training. It's like, what do you think that means?
Mhm.
Like, eat better. What would you take that as?
Right.
If you were a patient, what does eat better even mean? So I really feel for patients that we treat, because they don't have anywhere to source education from. And I think they want it, but they just don't know how.
Yeah.
And then they get pulled into the marketing of things, protein on the box,
Mhm.
and they're trying really hard because, oh, I read that we need to eat protein, or my doctor said I need to eat protein. So,
So
yeah,
I'd like to, again, just talk about a couple things. Like I'd like to talk about
yeah,
maybe why there isn't this kind of, more information about what
yeah,
to eat. And then I want us, in some of our remaining time, I'd love for us to kind of give our listeners some real specifics, or what are some first steps that
yeah. I want to do the
people can
same.
take. Yeah. So
Yeah,
I guess I just wanted, I feel like, there are like socioeconomic and education pieces to this, and I think, and it's somewhat like what was the food like when you were growing up, right? Like, was there somebody in your home who had the time and the knowledge to cook, well-rounded meals and to serve you whole foods? And unfortunately, that's often not the case. And so people are growing up with parents who don't have any better information, parents who are extremely stressed. And unfortunately, the way that it is right now is that, as we said, a lot of these ultra processed foods are the cheapest, right? And so,
unfortunately,
feeding a family of 4 or 6 at McDonald's is often literally like the cheapest way to feed your family. And so those factors, I don't think, can be really ignored in terms of how or why people grow up with literally not having the information about what it means to eat well. And so, as you point out, like going to your doctor when you're 35 or 45 and them saying, well, you just need to eat better, there's no background on that. Like, I don't know what that means, and so
such a loaded statement.
It's so loaded. And for that person, like, going and getting a Dunkin' Donuts that says it has drink that has extra protein in it, that's healthy for that person. So anyway, there's not a magic answer to that. That's a big rabbit hole, but I do think that we have to kind of just keep that part in mind.
That's a great point. Yeah, go ahead.
So say somebody it's really like they're starting from scratch, or you're starting from scratch with them, and they are engaged, they're motivated. Like, what are the first steps that you are going to tell somebody?
I think the first steps is sort of piggybacking off what I was talking about before, is sort of meet them where they are.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's really important, because it's really, I know I have colleagues that in the functional medicine space that are, practitioners of all disciplines. I think a lot of times we demonize nutrition because you and I understand, right? We have the degrees on the walls to say, we know what food, we understand it. But when you talk to a patient that has no background in education, right? It's not your daughter going to school to be, a master's degree in nutrition. You have to look at it from the patient's perspective. I think it's really important. It builds trust, it builds a connection, and it really meets them at where they are, so they don't feel like they're unintelligent about something. So I think that's that's how I treat patients with anything I'm discussing, right? Just sort of meet them at where they are with their education level. And then what I always tell patients is it's about little changes, right? What kind of little changes can we start to make? Can we try to replace your soda with something, or some of your sodas with an alternative? Yeah. Can I get you to try to eat a protein source at each meal? If you're eating a muffin for breakfast, right? How can we get you to eat something that's of a little bit more substance, right? And a lot of times patients, you mentioned the socioeconomic piece, and it's really important because that plays a role too. If you're, you got to get kids off to school and you've got to feed them 3 times a day times 4 kids, right? You have to kind of be resourceful. So it comes down to food that you might go through a drive-through to get or something. So, okay, if that's where you are, how can we change what you're getting? Yeah. If you have to get something from a drive-through and you're ordering this, well, what about something like A, B, or C in that drive-through facility? That's a little bit better. What about, trying to understand their work schedule? Well, I get up really early. I've got to be in the office at 5, or I've got to be wherever, and I don't have time to really eat anything. I'm not even really hungry. And then I don't get to eat my lunch until 2:00 in the afternoon. It's like, okay, well, what can you do that's within your reach? Because I feel like a lot of times in nutrition, or like I said, some of my colleagues even do this. I've seen it firsthand where they are asking patients for perfection. Yeah. Well, you've got to do this. You've got to sit down at blot, and you've got to get your 30 grams, and you've got to part this, and gluten-free, and that, and this, and it's like, yeah, all of that is perfect, but is the patient going to do that? No, absolutely not. 9 times out of 10, most patients, will be hard pressed to practice what you're preaching 100% from a nutrition perspective. So my philosophy, this is the way I was taught too, from a nutritional counseling perspective, is meet the patient where they are.
It's great.
And start making little changes that they feel that they are tangible and that they can say, I can do that. And then when they do it, yeah, that wasn't so hard. And then you make another change.
Another one, right?
You know, and yeah, no problem. I started doing this and yeah, totally easy. They just didn't know how to do it. And it just took me to educate. That's my method usually. And then, you know, 6 months goes by and we've made a big change with 5 or 6 little changes.
Yep.
Yeah. And I always preface for patients, I'm not asking you to be perfect. And I think that's a really important, you asked the question earlier, which is really great. I'm glad we discussed it about how we sort of bring up this topic. It can be sensitive for people. And I always try to tell people that no one is asking you to be perfect. And I think that's what they think they need to do, but it's far from it. Patients don't need to be, no one needs to be perfect to be healthy from a nutrition perspective and lifestyle perspective. I think that's really important for people to understand.
I do too. And I think that you're setting them up in your method and your approach, you're setting them up to feel empowered as opposed to like that they are like right off the bat, they're basically going to fail, right? Like if you set them, if you're kind of expecting perfection.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I remember I was shadowing, I was in school and I was shadowing one of my preceptor doctors and he was doing some nutritional education with a patient. And it was, you know, I need you to be gluten-free. It was just like a blanket statement to the patient. Yeah. And, well, what's the education? What's the reason, right? Why does the patient want to do that? Number one, what benefit do they get out of it? And the patient's response was, well, I'm Italian. We have lasagna on Sundays. You know, my grandmother makes, you know, spaghetti and meatballs. Like, I don't think so. Well, you have to be. It's not you have to be. That's not reasonable, right? You have to
not meeting the patient where they're at.
Right. It's like you have to try so hard to meet in the middle somewhere, right? Would it be best if they were? Sure, but maybe they can cut down. Maybe there's alternatives. Maybe you can do other things that are, you know, better to kind of offset. Maybe it's not 100% of a great, you know, but that's, I think, the most important piece of this is meeting people where they are with a nutrition perspective. Yeah. Do you have any thoughts?
I have a couple things that I like, kind of just general parameters, I guess. The way that I like to talk to people about it is that it doesn't start with what you're eating. It starts with your shopping list and that's
a good point.
What you're actually putting in your pantry and in your refrigerator. And so a couple things around that, because if you have healthy alternatives and you have things prepared, you can kind of grab something quickly and you can have, like we both have patients who are on the road a lot for their work. They're in sales, truck drivers. And those people, it's like, what's available to them? It's fast food all day long, every day. And so if you have a cooler with some better alternatives, like that's one way to help at least lower the amount of
that's a great idea.
Food or ultra processed food that you're eating. But what I like to tell people is when you've heard this before, when you go to the grocery store, you stay on the perimeter, right? Like,
yes,
as much as possible,
a really good point,
right? Because the freshest ingredients, that comes in at the outside of the store, right? That's where the delivery trucks come in the most frequently, is the produce, the meat, the dairy, as opposed to the stuff that we have been talking about, these ultra processed foods, which, as you pointed out, shelf life is a long time, and that can stay in the center of that, that aisle in the center of the store for a long time.
Just so more and more.
You don't have to be perfect, but focus on the foods that are the freshest. And then I think we said earlier about like these lists, the lists of ingredients. Usually an product that is ultra processed is going to have like over 6 ingredients on the list, and you're probably not going to be able to either pronounce or recognize those ingredients. So sticking to, as much as possible, a product that you recognize, the ingredient, you actually maybe could make something or, cook or bake something like that at home if you wanted to. you're probably in a safer zone. And again, it's not easy. And I think it's a really good point of not asking people to be perfect, but for some people, taking like a Sunday afternoon and that's your meal prep day. That's when you get your shopping
My meal prep
done.
day.
That's nice. And then you maybe like I said, you make a bunch of salads and Tupperwares that you just keep in the fridge, or you make that casserole or that soup or something that,
grill some chicken, like do some, something, put it in the
something that's easy, and even freeze things. And if you start getting into that habit more, it can feel, I think, a little bit less daunting. And as you said, baby steps, right? So maybe it's one shift, one little change, or one adjustment to how you shop, or what you like. Maybe you're not bringing cookies home anymore. Maybe that's it. Maybe that's the only piece of homework.
Yeah. I want to, we're getting to the point in the podcast where we're going to take some questions from patients that are people that are listening. So if you have a question, please drop it in the comment box. We'd love to answer your questions. We've got a few rolling in, but ask us anything you want. We'll try to answer them as best as we can. I want to talk about some case studies that we love. But before we dive into that, what I want to say too, from our experience, working at MedMatrix, doing functional medicine, for people that are listening, that want to improve health and nutrition, I'll give my perspective. What's your perspective? How do we do that? Like what's a very basic, way to incorporate nutrition into our practice? What's your favorite way of doing that?
Sometimes the first step is literally having them do a food journal, right? Or a diet diary, right?
Yeah.
So especially sometimes with our first visit, we're doing so much and we're going over so much. And so sometimes, and also a good point that you made earlier was, people will say, well, I eat great. It's super clean. And, I only rarely will eat, M&Ms. And then the way that I will preface that food journal is, you can do it on an app. You can do it on a piece of paper. You can do it on your computer. I don't really care how you do it. And I'm not here to judge. I don't need you to change what you're eating. I just want you to do it. And it's honestly largely for their benefit, not just mine. It's really so that they can actually see it. And I think that's a good baseline, because eating healthily means something different for each person.
Yeah. I love food journal is great. I do the same. And usually when I start to when I'm trying to educate patients on food and trying to understand food, because I think from my perspective as a clinician and as an educator, I really try hard to, as we said at the beginning of the podcast, that nutrition is almost the foundation of health. I mean, it really is, right? 85% of disease in humans is driven by poor diet. And we know that. It's very well studied in the medical literature. It's not something we're making up. So what I try really hard to do is let patients start to be educated about food. And one of the things that patients, I think, are struggling with is they don't know how to cook. I hear that a lot. And they don't know how to prepare food, that they just don't know what to do with it. And they don't know how to make it taste nice, right? If you were to take a patient out to a really nice restaurant, there's no processed food there, but the food is really good, right? If you were ordering something that was, and of course, not all our patients are chefs, but I always try to give them examples of, well, if you're eating foods in certain settings, they taste really good, right? So I'm not a chef either, so I can't educate patients on how to cook, but I try to give them resources and ideas of, okay, these are things to think about when you're thinking about meal prepping or thinking about food in a way that is not boring, or, well, I don't like eating vegetables because they're gross. It's like, well, you probably just don't know how to cook them. Yeah. And that might be a product of how they were raised. It might be a product of, just timing, right? I've got to do something fast. I don't have time to think about recipes or whatever. So that's one of the tricks I often try to use with patients is, let's try to talk about ways you can improve the food, the taste, how you feel about cooking, how you're sort of, like you said, with meal prep, if you don't like to cook, or, how can we make that better? And I think if patients start learning about food as it relates to their day and their relationship with food and how it tastes and how they can cook something, and if they cook something that's good and they enjoy it, it's almost like a really proud moment. Like, I made this and it's really good. And I'm proud to make this for my family or something. So I think that's a part of the education too,
Yeah,
is what the
absolutely.
food is, can you read the ingredients on the label, right? If you
Mm-hmm,
can't, then
mm-hmm,
don't eat it. But
mm-hmm.
it's really how to prepare it in a way that is satisfying for yourself and your family. So yeah, we want to get into some case studies. We love doing case studies on our podcast. Do you want to start? Do you want me to start? Do you have a good case?
I have a case. He's kind of front
Okay.
of mind because I just saw him today.
Oh, good.
So this is a
And ask questions, people, if you have questions, and then we'll do
yeah.
questions after
Please,
our cases.
please contribute.
Yeah.
So I believe that he is 68, and
Okay.
he came to us a year ago. He has a manual labor is his daily activity, right? And it has been for
Yeah.
decades. And
Yeah.
so he came in with lots of aches and pains, lots of he was about 50 pounds overweight, fatigued all the time. And unfortunately, like many of our patients, just wasn't getting the answers from conventional medicine, and kind of also I think felt like whatever he had tried on his own wasn't working. And so he, in a great way, came to us really ready to learn. And
I love that. It's my
yeah,
favorite.
so great. So we did do a number of things. Like I did his thyroid. He has hypothyroidism. I really needed to kind of adjust his medications. And so that was a big part of it, both energy wise and just metabolically.
Yeah.
But he, again, was like many of us, kind of grew up not really knowing how to eat. And it wasn't until he was like in his late 60s that it kind of occurred to him that that might be contributing to how he was feeling. And so, but he, like you just said, he didn't really know what to do with that. Like he kind of came in knowing that his nutrition needed to be better, but now what, right?
What do I
And
do
so
now? Yeah.
what do I do now? And so we, it was just a very kind of what I think of as basic, but it really isn't, of kind of like an anti-inflammatory way of eating. And so we really did work over the months of cutting down on his processed food. And I actually I was a little bit more conservative. Like I was approaching him a little bit more with the baby step, and he jumped right in. Like I saw him 3 months later and he had gone.
Nice.
He's just like not a moderation guy. He's like in or he's out. And so
Nice.
so he really like cut all that stuff out, and he lost 50 pounds in like 8 months or something. I mean, it was, yeah. And, he still has some aches and pains because of his work, and he's in his late 60s, but he doesn't, he can kind of get up and down off the floor. Like, he's tiling a floor or something. He can get up and down much more easily. It's greatly improved. And again, we're still working on his energy, still kind of tweaking the thyroid a little bit, but his energy level compared to a year ago is just so much better. And I attribute a lot of it to how he's changed in his eating habits.
That's awesome. Yeah. I've seen so many similar, but I have a patient. This was a couple of years ago, but she had struggled significantly with a lot of arthritic issues. So like joint pains, and to the point where it was kind of unusual, where she would go to see orthopedic specialists and musculoskeletal specialists, and they were sort of like, well, you have aches and pains. They were at the point where it was almost, well, why don't we do replacements of some of your joints that are painful? They weren't, we hear a lot of times, and we've talked a little bit about on the podcast about, some like surgical interventions that patients undergo, and, like almost, for example, a knee replacement, right? Usually a knee replacement is the joint has totally deteriorated away. There's not a lot of cartilage left. There's not a lot of, soft tissue in there to keep the joint stable. But this was a case, it was so interesting, where they were, this woman, I think she was in her early 60s, if I remember correctly, but it was to the point where, well, your knees are hurting. They don't look too bad on the x-rays, but we could do a knee replacement.
Sure. Right.
And it's like, whoa, your knees hurt, so let's just replace them. And I think that is sort of it is a bit of how conventional healthcare works, right?
Mhm.
Oh, your gallbladders, we'll just take it out.
Take it out.
For women, I'm having irregular menstruation and painful periods. We'll just take your uterus out. Like, no problem. You don't need that. So, she came to me for a myriad of reasons, but we struggled to get her pain under control. We were doing a lot of different things, and from like herbal stuff and initially, but then it was, and I had the talk with her many times. Listen, why don't you just try to not eat gluten for like a week and just see what happens? Just like appease me, right? Just for a couple days, see what happens. And it's just so hard. I know it's hard, but just try, try just to say that you did it. Right. And we can move on.
Right.
That was it. It was removal of gluten, and she was like running marathons.
Nice.
And when the pain went away, it was not only knee pain, it was hip pain, it was, hands, like arthritic hand pain. It was insane because when she removed it and then realized how much benefit she was getting from the removal, I could see her morph like almost in front of me. Like, it doesn't matter because I don't want to be in pain anymore. This food doesn't satisfy me. It's almost like something doesn't taste as good as how this makes me feel.
Right. Yeah.
Right. There's nothing that tastes as good as feeling a certain way, or you know what I'm trying to say? It's, there's no food. So she started to realize how much this impacted her. And it was really, really cool to see, like we were talking about earlier, where people are like, oh, I don't know if I can do that. That's like a lot to ask. But when they feel the benefit and the outcome, your mind shifts.
Yeah.
And we see that with food a lot. I'm sure you see that with patients, and it's like things just become less important over time.
I feel like what's important about one thing that's important about that story is that for her, it was a visceral shift. So
exactly.
It's no longer you having to convince her to eat a certain way. It was her own lived experience of it, and that's sustainable, right? As opposed to Dr. Renaud told me so it's right, but I don't feel it, right? Like I'm doing it because he told me to, but she actually like felt the difference and felt like it's really no longer worth me eating this. It doesn't taste that good. Yeah.
Right. And that's, I think, one of the tenets of what we do as functional medicine providers, and sort of what I was saying earlier, is if we can provide the time and the space and the resource to educate patients so they can learn this stuff on their own, and then they own it for themselves, right? It doesn't matter. It doesn't change my life if you do this or not. This isn't about me, right? It's about you. And if you do it and to change your life, that's really where the benefit comes from. So, it's really, really cool that we can do this. So
should we dive into some questions?
Yeah. If you guys have questions, please let us know. We don't have too many, and then we can give some final thoughts.
Let's see.
So we have to click on the question.
I know it's not. Maybe you can do it. It's not working on my end.
Oh, it's not working on my end either. I don't know how to do it. All right. Well, we'll read the questions.
We obviously don't have Cole here with us today.
Yeah, we don't typically host the podcast, but we're co-hosting today in the absence of our esteemed colleague Cole. But we don't know how to work some of the back end stuff. So I hope you guys have enjoyed just the two of us talking today. I think we've had fun. But we have a question here. It says, "Thank you, doctors. Question: how someone addicted to fast food or not so healthy foods can heal their gut to stop the addiction." Oh, there we go. Yay. Thank you to our background people.
Thank you to our background people.
We didn't go to school for media, so
clearly.
So how can someone addicted to fast food or not so healthy foods heal their gut and stop the addiction? You mentioned this earlier, Dr. Rose. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think the way that I think both of us work with people is kind of working at things simultaneously. So we can do stuff that can kind of start to heal, for example, the leaky gut or that gut permeability issue. We can do that through, sometimes there's certain peptides that work, which is like, those are kind of natural compounds that can target certain tissues. In this case, the gut lining. There's really great botanical and nutraceutical options. We can start to heal the gut, and then also work kind of on that, that dopamine, or that neurotransmitter, that addictive behavior. And as Dr. Renaud pointed out so well earlier, it's complicated, right? There's a lot of emotional trauma. There's a lot of, for different people, for all of us, there's different layers of that. And so, but I'm a believer in kind of addressing both at the same time. I think you don't have to pick one or the other. Yeah. How would you answer this?
Well, I was going to say, do you have like a quick, like 30-second, like how do you stop? What's the first thing that you would try to address with addiction? Food addiction.
It's not always easy, but like a sugar detox, know, so you do need to expect some withdrawal symptoms. But
I was going to say that. I think it's important. Yeah. Getting over the hump is. So food addiction is, I always give people sort of a timeline too. Some of the research says that food addiction, you really need like 21 to, I think it's 28 days off of a certain food. So what you said perfectly is the addiction, like withdrawal, like you're drying out from another type of, addiction, whether it's alcohol or cigarettes or, some type of drugs. Food is addictive, and we know that from brain chemistry. We know that from the science behind food. So someone that is addicted to fast food, I think part of it is almost like a 12-step program with people that have alcohol addiction. It's like you have to recognize that there's a problem. And if you don't, then it's really hard to break the cycle. And what I also think is really important to note in this whole podcast, and this kind of references back to this too, is it's really hard for people to break food addictions and to break addictions to the way they eat, like from a nutrition perspective, is if people in their immediate vicinity aren't on board. I've had patients where the spouse is like totally not buying into it, and they want to eat pizza and whatever. And, if the person that is trying to lose weight is the primary cook for the house, it's like, well, I have to cook something for myself, but my spouse won't eat it or my kids won't eat it. So, like I had a patient the other day, she was the primary cook in her house. And I had saw her in follow-up, and she basically very eloquently, she was like, I don't give a crap what the rest of my family's eating. I cook what I need. I started eating better. You really turned my light on to say, I need to focus on what I'm eating. And my husband, my kids don't want to eat it. They're grown. I don't cook for them anymore. Too bad. Make your own food. And it was like, yes, like I love that for you. It was so empowering. So there's these traps that people get, I think, caught in their day to day that keeps them in addictive behavior. And I think that has to be just part of the discussion, right? Why are you addicted? What's keeping you addicted? So I think that's really important. As we wrap up, Dr. Rose, this has been really, really fun. I've enjoyed our conversation. I hope our listeners have enjoyed just the two of us this week. Do you have any final thoughts about our topic today? Any final last minute thoughts or recommendations around food for our listeners?
Just that there's always room for improvement, but it's not about perfection. I think if there's one take home, that would be a big one, that it's not about being perfect, but that you can make baby steps, or what feel like baby steps, and over time that it's a huge step.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point. And I think it's important to note for patients that with anything that they do in their life, it's just important to understand, where they are, meeting them where they are, I think is important. Educating as we go. No one's looking for perfection. So I think we've made some really good points. For those that are listening, if you're interested in becoming a patient with MedMatrix, you can go to our website. It's medmatrixusa.com. We do see patients in Maine and New Hampshire. We're the largest functional medicine practice in the area. So if you're interested, you can go to our website. And if you like what you hear, you can follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. We do live webinars weekly on YouTube. So and if you have things you want us to talk about, comment on our videos, DM us on our Instagram and social media. We'd love to take ideas of things that you want to hear us talk about. So this has been fun, Dr. Rose. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah. And we'll see you guys on the next one. Bye.
Bye-bye.